Hello and welcome to this special show, The Heart of Business, where we shine the spotlight on philanthropy in India. Azim Premji has decided to donate 34% shares worth over 52,000 crore rupees to the Azim Premji Foundation. He's one of the handful of Indians who signed up for the giving pledge started by billionaires Warren Buffett and Bill Gates. Premji has decided to put his money to work to drive change. While Premji's philanthropy made headlines, it also puts the focus on the trend of giving in India. While 2% spends on corporate social responsibility is now part of the Companies Act, individual philanthropic efforts need to be catalyzed further. The Bain India Philanthropy Report for 2019 shows that if Premji's philanthropic contributions were excluded, Indian donations of 10 crore rupees and above have declined 4% since 2014, even as the proportion of the ultra-rich has grown by 12%. So what can be done to harness the power of philanthropy and promote the art of giving back? Joining me on the program, Sudha Murthy, the force behind the Infosys Foundation, Kiran Mazumdar Shaw, also a signatory to the Giving Pledge, and Anant Bhagwathi, author of the Bain India Philanthropy Report. Mrs. Murthy, Kiran and Anant, appreciate you joining me on this show today. Mrs. Murthy, let me start by asking you, ma'am, India has had a long culture of daan, of charity, of giving back. As we look at the future today, you know, whether it's through the Giving Pledge, it's through corporate social responsibility spending, which is now mandatory on part of companies, what can be done to catalyze the power of individual philanthropy? What is the way forward, to your mind, as we see the rise of ultra high net worth individuals in India, which is only expected to grow faster and bigger from here on?
Shereen, India has that tradition of giving back, but you know, all these years it was different because it was a charity kind, in the sense you will have a temple feast, or you will have a particular community giving to their community. But now it has come out in a much different way after 2% of CSR. The reason is now it is much more systematic, like you have a strategy, you have a rule, and where you can give, where you cannot give. So this is a different, altogether different method of giving. And I am seeing there is a growth of youngsters physically volunteering and also giving individually to a cause, whichever is dear to their heart. So I'm sure that in coming years, people who I mean, particularly youngsters, feel that they would like to give something which is nice, or which they are passionate, and they would like to give to the good foundations at times. Sometimes they will give directly, but we require to run any non-profit organization like a company, in the sense same auditing, same methodology of strategy. There are certain rules with the legal opinion. So in the coming years, it is going to be very significant way of giving.
Absolutely. So you're talking about the institutionalization that's happened by way of corporate social responsibility being made mandatory on account of the Companies Act. So it's very clear, the rules define where you can give, where you can't give, how you can give. And you're also saying that there needs to be a more accountability and transparency even when it comes to non-profits and how they operate. Let me bring in Kiran Mazumdar Shaw into the conversation. Kiran, you're one of the handful of Indians who've signed up for the Giving Pledge started by Warren Buffett and Bill Gates. What made you want to do that, and what is your approach as you look at philanthropy for the future of driving change in India?
You know, as a first-generation entrepreneur and a wealth creator, I've always believed that wealth is something that has to be used to make a difference to society, to make impact on societal improvement. And as you know, personally, I've always believed that wealth and knowledge are to be shared and not hoarded. So I just feel that that has been my personal driving philosophy. As far as I'm concerned, I think India is is a country which is creating a large number of HNIs and wealth creators in general. And I think this is a time for people to really get inspired by the whole philosophy of giving, and the fact that wealth has to be invested to make a better society.
Kiran, you've decided to put your money to work when it comes to healthcare. The Infosys Foundation, which Mrs. Murthy will speak about, has done a lot when it comes to education and also related to healthcare. Now, how do you go about it? Let me pick up on the point that Mrs. Murthy made about the institutionalization of spending that we've seen. How do you go about making decisions on where to spend, how much to spend? How do you monitor and measure return on investment, for instance, as far as the philanthropic aspect is concerned?
So, Shereen, I look at, philanthropic capital as a kind of a catalytic capital or a kind of an experimental or risk capital. So there are many areas where I think you should use this kind of capital to take some bold ideas, experiment with bold ideas. And there, of course, I do things like, investing in think tanks, investing in different kinds of models of, new ideas. And then, of course, in terms of really investing in very, very well strategized areas, it's obviously about healthcare and about education as well. For instance, I've lent support to Kriya University. I've lent, of course, I've lent a lot of support to building a cancer hospital and to a number of cancer areas. Now, these are measurable areas. These are areas where you can actually assess the impact you're making because you're doing it at scale. But there are a number of other areas that need to be scaled up, and you need to make those early investments to see how they will pan out. So mine is a kind of a mixed bag of how I choose areas that I want to be involved with. For instance, I've also invested and supported a museum because I feel that museums need to be built up in this country, and we need to basically, showcase a lot of our traditions. So I've done a lot of those kind of things, but I think when it comes to big ticket investments, it's always been in something that's tangible, something that can really be measurable in terms of impact, which is, setting up large universities, large hospitals and things like that.
Sure. Let me bring Anant into the conversation. Anant, it's a very interesting report that you've authored, and stripped off the Premji contribution, you're actually saying that contributions from ultra-high net worth individuals have decreased 4% since 2014. What will it take to catalyze this ecosystem even further? And what do you believe are the impediments for seeing this big move towards the kind of risk capital that Kiran Mazumdar Shaw was talking about, that Mrs. Murthy was talking about? Because even if we have to achieve, some of the sustainable development goals as a country, there is a lot more that we need to do in terms of investing behind those goals.
That's right, Shereen. And hi, and good evening to everyone. So I think the interesting thing is it's a little bit of a glass half full, half empty situation, which is while there are exceptional examples like Premji and Sudha and Kiran, etc. I think what's happening is a very large number of people with money are still taking a very fragmented and non-strategic look at philanthropy. So to give an example, in for-profit, the very common term is what percentage of the addressable market am I catering, right? Why are the same people not looking at what percentage of the addressable problem in India? Problem could be, let's say, let's say underprivileged adolescents. Am I actually doing? And if you just take that one metric, so the whole theme of the report is put outcomes at the center and look at what percentage of the addressable problem of India's problem. And if it's less than 1% or 5%, then what are we doing? So I think one part of the problem is not having the outcome at the center. And the second part is not having vehicles which are more collaborative and more accountable, which can absorb capital of that magnitude. The largest NGOs will be very small in India compared to other places. So I'd say both sides.
That is a challenge. And let me get Mrs. Murthy to discuss both those issues. Mrs. Murthy, you know, one of the problems, and we've discussed this in the past as well, is how do you actually build scale? Now, whether you talk about the healthcare problem, which Kiran is trying to address, or we talk about the education problem, for the size of the problem that India needs to address, you need a lot more collaboration and you need a lot more money. What is it going to take for us to get more collaboration across this ecosystem of philanthropy, which currently is very, very fragmented and, as Anant pointed out, perhaps even non-strategic?
Well, that's the reason this year we started a new initiative called Arohan Avishkar Dil Se. We said we'll find out the main aim of that competition. Will encourage people who have a project which is going to be useful to the society and they can scale up. So we'll give them initial money, holding their hand, then 8 weeks training at IIT Hyderabad, so that how they can scale up, because there may be many people who have the idea but they do not have the contact, or who have the idea, they do not have money. And this is socially, it should affect bigger section of the society. So we conducted an experiment and it worked out quite well. And so the first batch, you know, we have taken people, and there's a platinum, gold, silver, bronze medals. I mean, that kind of category we made. So scaling up requires a mentorship, because a single idea limited to your family, limited to your society, you know, in the neighborhood, will not help in a large way. Like we are experimenting with the drinking water. Is there any way with a cheaper technology, more efficient way of getting the good water? For example, we have done with Avishkar Dil Se an experiment. You know, somebody has done in Bombay, PhD students, that with the small changes in the hand pump, they can get very good, clean water, which can be scaled up properly. So we require a good mentorship to scale up, because these people may or may not be aware of it.
Absolutely, and I think that's a valid point that you make, that there is the need to create mentors across this ecosystem as well. But Kiran, on the point that Anant was making, and you know, I'm just looking at the funding requirements. Additional funding of 4.2 lakh crore rupees annually will be required to achieve even 5 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. That's what the Bain India Philanthropy Report throws up. Now, the point that I'm trying to make is that, you know, you're individually doing something to address the healthcare issues. You've created a 1,400-bed cancer center, for instance, in partnership with Dr. Devi Shetty. Sudha Murthy is doing something. Shiv Nadar is doing something. What can be done to create that collaborative vehicle which addresses India's large problems?
So I think, you know, a lot can be done, but as Anant said, that, you know, it's really about the absorptive capacity of where you invest. Now, one of the things that I've been investing in is, you know, really the whole arena of science and society, science and technology. And I think I really want to see how we can, you know, support good science in the country. So I've been sort of giving a lot of grants and research grants and scholarships and even building science labs in schools and things. So again, I'm hoping that this absorptive capacity will be able to translate into a larger number of people pursuing science, and then obviously then giving back to society through their own pursuit of science and technology. Now, I think each one has to choose your calling. I think it's very difficult to just focus on the sustainable development goals that you're talking about.
Sure.
And I think when it comes to corporate social responsibility, yes, I think you should look at the SDGs and see where can you play. But I think what Anand made a very important point is that how do we basically create large NGOs, you know, like the Gates Foundation and others, to really start doing things at a much bigger scale. And that's where I think the government also should be working with us to scale up. Now, for instance, we have started this digital primary health clinics, but it's more to catalyze the concept of digital primary health clinics with the hope that the governments will run with it and expand it and scale it up. So I think there's an urgent need for the government to collaborate with philanthropy and with philanthropic capital to see how they can use this risk capital or catalytic capital to really experiment with new ideas and then scale them up through the government kind of programs.
Well, that was the aspiration even as far as the corporate social responsibility spending was concerned. Anant, to pick up on the point that's being made there by Kiran, the role that the government can play both as a collaborator as well as a facilitator, and what the experience has been so far with the CSR spending. Because if I take a look at your report, you're basically saying that 15% of the average budget continues to be unspent for the year 2018.
Yeah, and just to second Kiran's point, I think if you just look at the numbers, there is literally only one production engine which can solve this problem. It's the government of India. And catalytic capital, which is the private philanthropy, can go a long way. Think of it like lubricating oil, right? If you think of private philanthropy as the fuel, it'll actually not go far. And three things which can happen. One is talent, because it's very hard for the government to inject the right kind of talent at the front lines, which needs things to move. So private philanthropy can pay for some of that. Program management. Government has many ministries. If you go to the front line at the panchayat, there might be 6 people working, not coordinating. So program management at the front line. And then proving risk and innovating, the point which Kiran made. I think there are clear catalytic roles of the private philanthropy which can enable the government. I think both parties have to come together. But, frankly, there are examples where people are coming together, and those are the places where the impact is magnified, because, that's very critical.
Okay.
Just on CSR, I think the challenge is...
Where does it work?
CSR, my
before
belief...
we get to CSR,
there are examples.
Where has it worked so far, Anand? Can you give us some examples?
Take a look at HIV. Like, HIV elimination in India has been a fantastic story. There was a time where it looked like India is going to become the, place where HIV is going to spiral out of control. It was not something where we heard too much news, but the figures were really alarming. And actually, Bill Gates Foundation was one of the entities which came in. The whole program was managed by the government, and frankly, you see the results now. So I'd say there are examples, but there can be many more. But on the CSR, I think the one request I'd have is if the CEO can spend even like 5% of their time asking the strategic questions, saying what is the percentage of addressable problem I'm solving and how, rather than delegating it to the foundation head. Because the issue is, it is too strategic to delegate. And the same business principles, if applied here, will actually go far. But today, that's being delegated down 2 levels, 3 levels below the CEO. And that's why we see the results which is in front of us right now on CSR.
Okay, so that's the challenge that the corner office faces when it comes to the CSR spendings. But Kiran Mazumdar Shaw and Sudha Murthy, I want to come back to you because, again, I go back to the data that the Dasra and the Bain report shows up. Ultra-high net worth individuals have the potential to give 2.5 to 3.5 times more than they are currently giving. Kiran, what will it take to catalyze the growth of this philanthropic capital? What will it take to facilitate the growth of this movement?
I think people have to be inspired to give, and I think if it becomes a culture, the giving culture is celebrated, and if the giving culture is looked upon as something worthy of emulation in a big way, I think you'll find people actually doing more. And I think media also has to celebrate philanthropy in a much bigger way. And it's not just about, Mr. Premji or myself or somebody else signing up with the giving pledge, but I think you need to celebrate philanthropy of every proportion in a bigger way than what it is being done today. So I think there is a lot of giving. I think I find a lot of the young techies in Bangalore who want to contribute, but I think we need to basically make it a habit and make it into a something to be proud of, something to celebrate, something to emulate. I think that's the way you have to do it. And I think it has to become a very, very important habit for everyone who is earning a lot of money.
Yeah, Mrs. Murthy, what would your thought be on how do we make this part of the culture?
Well, I have 2 points. One is you asked collaboration, but you know what happens? I'm passionate on certain issue, and somebody is passionate on some other issue. So unless the minds are collaborated, you cannot collaborate to NGOs. Okay, this is what I have found out in my work, that I like to work with Devdasis. So for example, I take that one, destitutes, and somebody would like to work on something else. So what is my priority will not be their priority, and that is the reason many times collaboration fail. Now, government, actually government has lot of projects on CSR. I have seen, at least in Karnataka government, I have seen there are a lot of projects. There is plenty of money in that. But you know, it becomes a project, quotes. Because in a project, your salary is paid and you do some work. Philanthropy is not like other subject, where you should have passion for the suffering of the other people to help them. And unless you have passionate people in the project will not succeed, whatever may be your strategy. So the best way I feel, if there is a well-known NGO or a non-profit organization, and if government, for example, government of Karnataka has asked me, they would like to give me money for pond restoration at Melukote, which is 1,000 years old. They said, we'll give you 32 crores. And you know, you should produce all the whatever results as per the project, and also transparent, because Infosys Foundation is famous for its transparency and efficiency. So government is ready to give us money. And if you have good collaboration between an NGO and the government, and it should be audited, it should be transparent, and then you can do with the government also. But government having its own projects are very difficult to succeed, because people who are not passionate are in charge of the the project. So I feel when you do a good work, people do observe, and your work speaks for yourself.
Absolutely. It's not just about project management skills, but passion as well that you need to bring to the table. Anant, I'll give you the final say on the show before we wrap. And that really has to do with the point that was just made by Sudha Murthy. You know, accountability, transparency, efficient use of capital. And there have been questions raised about the quality of NGOs, the kind of work that is finally delivered on the ground, what happens with my money. And those are the questions that people ask before writing out checks as well, or before collaborating with particular agencies. What more can be done to sort of draw up a database of organizations who are doing good work that can partner with the common citizen, should the common citizen want to do so?
Right, Shereen. And you know, a slightly provocative answer on that one, which is, I think NGOs have to learn to talk in maths more than English, right? Because ultimately numbers matter, and ultimately outcomes matter. And frankly, India's problems are so massive and money so less, that if you are not the most efficient in trying to solve a problem at scale, why should you be trying to do it? You should give it to someone who can. So I think NGOs have a journey to go to actually start talking outcomes, not inputs, not outputs, but outcomes, and start talking in very transparent language. And I've heard this from large givers, which is they struggle. They say, look, I love what they do, and I think they are great, but I can't see the line of sight to where the money will have the outcomes. So how do I actually write a check for 100 crores or 500 crores? So they are stuck in that loop, and I think someone has to break out of that soon.
Well, we hope that we do see that breakthrough. Kiran Mazumdar Shaw, you know, you've clearly been inspired to sign up for the Giving Pledge. What has been the single biggest, most inspiring moment for you to want to do that? And I'm hoping that people will be inspired by what you say on the program. So share with us what that eureka moment was for you.
Well, I think just seeing what everyone, like, you know, like the Gates, the you know, Azim Premji and many others were beginning to do with their wealth actually inspired me, and it actually resonated very well with my own philosophy of giving. And I just felt that this was a great way of making, being a part of that giving culture And so I signed up, basically I did go and attend a giving pledge get together, and I saw everyone, being so proud of giving and making sure that they actually engage and participate with the giving process. And that's what really inspired me, saying, hey, this is something that I have to be a part of.
Mrs. Murthy, what continues to inspire you, and what would your words be to the young people who are watching this show, the ultra high net worth individuals?
Poor people inspire me. When I look at them, my conscience says you have a duty towards them. It is it's an invisible line. Why you are born here, it is not of your choice, but you are born there and they are born there at the side of the line. So we have a duty towards them, and that is the greatest inspiration for me. And I consider every day is a holiday for me because I enjoy my work. And then I have seen death very near to very near to me. It may be tsunami, it may be earthquake, it may be many things. We have handled 13 national disasters, and I have seen death very near. And I realized that, what we think of hoarding so much is futile in life. You do require money for your comfort, for your certain requirements, but giving, the joy of giving gives you bigger happiness than any other thing.
Well, that is the perfect note to end this conversation. The joy of giving, the art of giving, the power of philanthropy. And of course, as we've discussed here on the program, we need to start making this much more part of the conversation that we have, make it part of public discourse, try and see how we can collaborate the social sector with government for specific projects, and of course, the addressable problems of which are many, as Anant was pointing out. Funding and passion and project management is the order of the day. Kiran Mazumdar Shaw, Sudha Murthy and Anant Bhagwathi, appreciate you joining us here to discuss the power of philanthropy in India and the road ahead. With that, it is time for us to wrap up the CNBC TV 18 special. From all of us here, goodbye. Many thanks for watching.